in
Recording in
Carolina
progress.
University. Thank you all for joining, and I would just like to pass to each one of you for introducing yourselves and your projects. And you have 5 minutes each to this introduction. And we have a few questions that we're gonna get into, but also everyone that is present is very welcome to submit questions in the chat, and we can pull it from there and ask participants. So if you want to ask a question, just put the question and um, who do you want it to answer. So I will pass to Griff to start introduction, and then we'll move forward.
Sure. So I'm Griff. Hi. I work with Giveth, Token Engineering Commons, Commons Stack, DAppNode, and a whole bunch of other projects too. But those are where I spend most of my time. And I've been looking at reward systems for the last, I don't know, 5 years, since the DAO days. But there was just like we were just about to talk about how we're going to create rewards in the community, but that didn't last long. So we never really went very far with that. But then we carried that into Giveth because Giveth started right after the DAO, and we were looking at how do we reward volunteers, and the whole purpose of Giveth is like, how do we build economy? The purpose of Giveth at the time was kind of what the purpose of Common Stack is now, which is to build economies around causes and create a reward system for the work that's being done, because so much good work is being done by charities. Why aren't they rewarded? That's just silly, right? And so rewarding volunteers was an important part. So we started this thing called Reward DAO, and the Reward DAO had probably 4 or 5 iterations, trying different things. And while I was doing Giveth and working on those things, I also run a couple Burning Man camps, Decentral and Doge Central, and there are lots of praise experiments in Decentral. In fact, Mitch knows all of them. He comes to my camp. He's our head chef. He's also a Web3 superstar. But we do praise and shame, which was interesting, right? Although one year we didn't do shame. But what we learned at Burning Man, or what it felt really good at Burning Man, where we would praise without quantification. It was just straight up acknowledgement. So we'd have acknowledgement for praise, and then we'd also have, but there would be no quantification. And everything was all lovey-dovey. And we'd praise people, for their actions. And then when we introduce shame, we'd only shame behaviors. We wouldn't actually shame people, right? So we'd be like, oh, I found a hammer out on the ground in the playa. Everyone knows it's supposed to be in the tool corral. Shame, 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 right? It was really fun. And the same with praise. It's like, oh my gosh, Mitch made such an awesome meal. How about we all praise Mitch? Mitch, praise, praise, praise. And it was really fun. And this acknowledgement, without the quantification is half of the battle. It's half of the fun, I would say, with these reward systems, is the non-monetary qualitative acknowledgement. But then, hey, we're trying to build Web3 systems, right? Hey, Gideon. We're trying to build these Web3 systems, and we want to create tokens. So now we have to quantify that qualitative love, and that's where things get messy. I like to say it's like, this is how the sausage is made, right? And then we have to figure out some sort of way to quantify that qualitative stuff. So we do it with the TEC. The TEC, we've done some really cool work around praise, and then we had a lot of research around it that I'm sure we'll get into later. And Giveth and TEC are now integrating SourceCred and the praise system to try to quantify what can be quantified and qualify, and use praise for the qualitative stuff that's hard to quantify. That's my intro. I'll pass it back to you, Livia.
Thanks, Griff. I'll pass to Hamad next.
Hey all, I'm Hamad, also known as MetaDreamer. I've been working in the DAO space for almost 2 years now. Yeah, I've been super interested in sort of better DAO tooling and mechanisms in which we can help to make decisions in DAO and get people rewarded. I've been a core contributor to SourceCred for about a year or just over a year now. And I'm a member of Metacartel Ventures, Metagame, and Metafactory, kind of bouncing around those DAOs and finding the common patterns and building tooling and experiments to figure out how to better like measure and reward value creation. Yeah, that's me.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about Metacred and what state are you guys at and what has been happening there?
Yeah, sure. So the goal of Metacred is basically to start to capture and aggregate all this like information on value being created and work being done, not just within a DAO, but between DAOs, because a lot of the value created in this ecosystem is not just for one organization, but it affects the whole community and the whole ecosystem. So I think we had this vision of like the DAO back in the day, but I think that vision is starting to like manifest now, not as like one singular DAO, but like the collective sum of all the DAOs in the community. But we don't have as much connectivity between the DAOs themselves. So the goal of Metacred is to be a layer on top of SourceCred, on top of Praise, on top of all these different rich data points that we have on people and the work they've done in DAOs, and be able to like attach this to our identities and our reputations and explore what that looks like, because there's a lot of considerations there when it comes to like privacy and there's a lot of moving parts. So yeah, Metacred's kind of like a shelling point to get people who are thinking about these problems to share and flow information, resources, and data between each other, and hopefully even creating markets around this so we can start to flow capital, not only where it's like at the intersection of monetary transactions, but we can quantify the value of opinions and statements and facts, and use cryptography for not only cryptocurrencies but crypto data and identity and reputation and all this. And I think that's really like the next major step into taking DAOs from like validation like phase and experimentation phase into like production phase, and really allowing them to realize their full potential.
Thank you. And I'll pass to Zach.
Thanks, and good to meet y'all. I am indeed Zach. I am one of the core instigators, I guess, at Coordinape, and I also work with Yearn. I'm a contributor at Yearn as well, and then, of course, like many of us, I'm sure, have a lot of other DAOs that I kind of play in. I'm new to this space. I'm almost always the newest person in crypto in every conversation I'm in. I started last year, and before that, so I had a consultancy that we started about 8 years ago called Converge, and it was focused on how to build human networks to solve social and environmental impact. So basically have different issues like landscape conservation or income inequality or migrant rights, and bringing together government and corporate and nonprofit leaders together and sort of building them into now what I would call like an IRL DAO. And so by doing lots of those different projects all over the world, learned a lot about coordination and how humans like actually work together and how they actually balance different incentives, because almost everyone that's part of a network has their day job that they're doing too. And so they're always balancing all these competing rewards. And so when I discovered DAOs, it was kind of a big moment, and I got obsessed, and I still am. And so Coordinape, we started originally kind of incubated solving a problem within Yearn, which was at Yearn, they had this grants committee, and they would get petitions for grants every month for people that were contributing, moderating the Discord or translating docs or things like that. What they kind of found is that, people were applying for grants, and it was kind of an arbitrary, process. They'd just be like, I want this much for doing this. And then some people didn't apply for grants that added a lot of value, and they were having to make these sort of apples to oranges decisions about who should get a grant and why. And then they're like, why are we even on this committee? Like, who appointed us here? And so ultimately we said, well, what if we just ask ask the network like where the value is being generated and how the grant should be distributed. And so we created Coordinape, which is essentially a system where each person in a circle, right, that's contributing in whatever sort of level of task you're talking about, but people get together and can distribute value amongst themselves. So they use on our platform like essentially poker chips that are called Give, and they pass them to each other, and then whatever percentage of Give they get, that is the percentage of the budget or allocation or resource that they get. And so we built that for Yearn, and then suddenly it turns out a lot of other DAOs are really interested in this too. And so now we have about 30 different projects that are using that have Circle set up and are using Coordinape, and we are figuring out how to make it better.
Thank you. Yeah, and congratulations. I saw that Coordinape was the most cited reward system in the Gitcoin survey. So that's pretty cool.
Thank you. I feel compelled though to like asterisk that data slightly, I think, because Bankless is such a huge Coordinape circle that I think it's not entirely representative data, but still it was great to see.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll pass to Andrew.
Hi, y'all. I'm Andrew Penland. I work in the Mathematics and Computer Science Department at Western Carolina University. My story in math is kind of important to know. I was very not a traditional math person all through school, and I sort of came in cryptocurrency through an interest in decentralized governance and alternative currencies. I have experience with reward systems because as a professor now, I have to think about how to grade the class. And even before I got interested in this specific topic, I thought a lot about what was fair about grading and what was important in intrinsic motivation of learning versus extrinsic motivation of learning. I got interested in reward systems and cryptocurrency completely by accident. There was an interesting conversation happening in the TEC one day, and I just kind of jumped on. But what was happening during that discussion is they were discussing how praise was being mapped to something called impact hours, and then how those impact hours would be mapped to the TEC tokens. So I just kind of volunteered to think about that question. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into at the time. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. And I think what I was able to bring to it was precisely what was mentioned a moment ago about how to quantify these things in a measurable way. Now that has its drawbacks, but I read a lot of the literature that's known in cryptocurrency about how resource distribution is handled, and some of the tools that are used, things like the Gini coefficient, the Shannon entropy, the Nakamoto coefficient. And I'm not trying to paper bomb you, but if you're curious about any of the things, here are some good starting places. And it turns out, ironically, just as we were wrapping up this, and I just found this paper this morning, that Vitalik has written a blog post about what the right ways to measure inequality in token distributions are. And his blog article, ironically, is called Against Overuse of the Gini Coefficient. Mm-hmm. So I've skimmed that and reading it. It's very interesting. But that's my perspective. My opinions about fairness are the same as anyone else's, but I do have some degree of expertise in metrics and optimization and writing code. And I want to give a shout out to Sean Anderson at Longtail Financial, who also played a very important role in doing the quantitative analysis of the praise distribution question.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks everyone for the introductions. And I wanted to bring you all together here and also have Andrew present, because I feel like a lot of the challenges that we are facing is how to quantify things, how to transfer subjective data to objective data, how to find the right metrics for the things that we're measuring, and are these metrics are can this matrix tell us something about the health of the ecosystem? So I'll pass around this first question that is for everyone again, but for this to open a little more discussion and for everyone to also, based on these challenges, to write on the chat any questions that you might have. So what are the biggest questions that you see with either with reward systems in general or with the reward system that you work with? So I'll pass to Hamad to start.
Sure. Yeah, so I think the question of like objective, truths is an important one. And, I think it's easy to sort of come to like consensus on what's like objectively valuable or should be rewarded or how much it should be rewarded within like, smaller groups of people, maybe up to like, 15, 20 max. After that, it starts to like fall apart and different people have different perceptions. So I think in terms of like scaling out these reward systems beyond just like smaller groups of individuals, we need a way to capture like intersubjectivity. So I think it's really impossible to try to come towards like global consensus on some sort of like let's all vote on what should be rewarded where. Instead, I think it's much better to like come to consensus on a process and then like just deploy that process. And then if that process has issues, then you can vote or coordinate and come to consensus on how to change that process. But the process should be a way or a mechanism in which we can quantify individual beliefs and statements and values, and then be able to like sum across multiple of them in either like subgroups or even in a nested format. So Coordinate's a good example of this, where we're not trying to come up with like an allocation from the top down level. Instead, we let people gift each other, give from a bottom up level, and then the sum of all the give that everyone did becomes like the distribution. And I think that pattern of like pushing the decisions out to the edges and then quantifying them and then lifting them back up by running algorithms on it, I think that is a generalizable pattern that we can start to explore more, and that's how we'll also be able to scale beyond certain communities and flow value between different communities without needing to like come to consensus between them or have to fully understand who's making the decision in this other community and like evaluating whether or not it's accurate or not. And you have to do a whole bunch of due diligence before you decide like to flow funding in a certain community or direction, like who's going to be managing this, like all this stuff, versus letting people have that intersubjectivity, and you don't need a top-down decision making. It's kind of like an emergent group belief that comes out of like quantifying individual statements and values and running algorithms on them.
Do you want to pass to the next person?
Sure. Zach.
Thanks. So the biggest challenge I see with reward systems is that there are always people in them, and that like it's kind of glib, but it's like people. It's always just like, it was perfect. Like we designed it so well, right? And then you put people in, and they are not. Each person themselves is like a super complex system full of like really irrational choices constantly, and then you put the more people you kind of put in. The more complex it gets and the harder it is to sort of design something with that's going to be totally fair and totally work, because people will take all sorts of unexpected turns. I think the big challenge with reward systems that we're experiencing also is just that intersubjectivity, which is also kind of its superpower. But you have 5 different people or 100 different people looking at something and saying and deciding what's fair, and what kind of work should be rewarded. And then you also have this other perspective that it's like, well, the kind of work that's being rewarded is what the system wants to happen. And so balancing those two, I would say it's like, how do you provide minimum viable structure for people to start interacting and sort of figuring out what's valuable for that project or that community on their own? And then, you know, what is the feedback loop so that there's some kind of self-reflection mechanism to say like, wow, we're really valuing all the people that make memes. Like, is that really what we value? Is that what we want to be rewarding, or do we want to be rewarding other stuff too? And of course, we just want to reward the memes is usually where it ends up. I see Griff nodding his head. So yeah, I think the challenge with reward systems, like how small a structure, minimum viable structure can you do while it's still helpful so that it's not just total chaos. And then of course, like the more pushing to the edges that you can get, you know, push the decision about what's valuable to the people that are making that value. And that's of course like the big problem we see with corporate systems, where it's sort of like arbitrarily determined from someone who has no idea what the day-to-day is actually like. And I will pass to Griff.
Yeah, I mean, all I can do is echo basically. I mean, the biggest challenge is how do you pass to the edges? In the end, you know, groups of people have a tough time making decisions, and trying to have like a list of people and everyone deciding on who gets what is just a chaos. So really, it's best to have each individual person like make a ranking or give their own quantification as an individual. But then you run into this challenge of, oh crap, how do we get people to actually participate? You know, do we pay people to participate? Like all the people who are loud and extroverted are going to show up, you know, and they're probably going to reward other loud and extroverted people. And so now the introverts that are quietly doing their great work, you know, that don't really want to go into these awkward situations where they have to quantify people and stuff, they get shafted, you know. And so like however you design the system, you're going to be leaving out people by just the dynamic that you're creating, the mechanism of capturing this data that will prevent people from participating. So I mean, that's this like kind of like trying to design the best structure to reward as many people as fairly as possible is really difficult. But definitely pushing to the edges helps a lot. And it's just, how do we get that involvement? How do we get people's participation? And I also think that it's really hard to want to, you know, there's a lot of value in division of labor sometimes, right? And so you're kind of fighting against that. You're saying, no, everyone has to quantify everybody, you know, and be participating in this work. And if you don't have that, then you have a very skewed perspective of just the people who are participating and what their backgrounds are. So you're really fighting against a lot of natural things. And in the end, like, unless you have a good way to make it fun, which I think Coordinape has found a way to make it fun and really focus on that, like giving, you know, this isn't like rating, you know, this isn't scoring, this isn't paying, this is giving, you know, and these framings are so critical, and getting the framing right is like half the battle, you know. Praise, right? We're praising people, you know, but then I framed it all wrong. Oh, this is how the sausage is made. Get in there and quantify people, guys. I'm sorry, that was a mistake. You know, we gotta do better framing. We have to make sure it's fun. We have to make sure the quantifiers are treasured and also as diverse as possible. Yeah, I'll throw it to Octopus.
So in addition to what everyone has said, like the social technical interaction is huge, because even with social media, we see that people are not always the same when they're interacting in this digitally mediated way. So we already had like the human aspect of resource distribution, which is a humongous problem no one agreed on. And then you have people coming to this completely new space, and often we bring different expectations about it. Like, what appeals to me about cryptocurrency is not economic, it's about being able to get things done without coercion. Whereas someone else may just be trying to make $1 million. And if there aren't really authentic conversations about what we value, then you can have this situation where people realize they valued completely different things, and they're just now discovering that when they go to give the rewards because they want to reward different things. I think that's a really big challenge, is the community figuring out what it actually values.
Yeah, there's a really good point that Hamad brought up of creating this emergent belief systems of how people were valuing things without having to pass through a layer of decision making, and that there is like a self and multiple assigning of value happening from multiple actors in the space. So that leads to a question that is something I've been thinking a lot about, on how to move away from the manipulative nature of the systems. Because reward systems, there's a big literature on it that talks about how both punishment and rewards come from the same source of a manipulative system, that you're inducing people to have a certain behavior to have a product of a result that you want or that you would like see happening. So I think we are slowly shaping something else that is not exactly a reward system, but that it has other qualities from everything that I've been hearing from what you guys bringing. So yeah, I want to ask this question of, do you think there is a way to move away from the manipulative nature of the systems, balancing intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation? I'll pass to Andrew to start, and then if any of you want to complement his answer, feel free to jump in.
I think, just for me personally, the economic value has never been worth whatever community I was able to find. So like, there was a time in crypto when I was really focused on making money, and it became a complete depleter of joy for me. And this year I have somehow managed to make $0 in cryptocurrency, but I've had so much fun. And I think that ideally, like, whatever reward systems we give would be supportive of those authentic things, but then it's like, as soon as we make a reward system, we fall into this trap. So I really have no good answers. I pass to Griff.
There's no good answers for this kind of stuff. I mean, in the end, like, you think, I don't know, I like to think of money ideally as happiness points in general, right? And reward systems should be able to somehow capture, like, oh, how much happiness, how much joy, how much production, how much like success was this person in this time period? You know, how much did they contribute to that? And measuring that is like, or like, where do you draw the scope? What, you know, what even, it's really hard. And then when you draw the scope, you're naturally creating a game, and you're going to have people jumping through the hoops that you put up. Like, that's the game. So I feel like it's an impossible task to say, oh, we're going to create a reward system that doesn't manipulate or incentive, you know, drive people in one direction or another. That's the nature of the game. You're creating a game, and the game's not the game of life, right? It's the game of whatever scope that you're putting in. So I think it's important to design it so that scope is clear to everyone, you know, and the incentives are aligned with that scope, so that it's not manipulation if it's just a game. Am I being manipulated when we play Monopoly? I don't think so. I'm participating in a game that I'm opting into, that I know the rules and I know what the goals are, and I'm choosing to play it. So I feel like it's probably more to avoid manipulation. You probably just need to communicate effectively and design the system so that it actually achieves the goals of the system. And that would not be manipulating. It's like, if we're playing source cred, you know, and the source cred says, hey, do GitHub issues, do forum posts, and make people give you emoji on Discord. that's the game, you know, and and unfortunately it might not be perfectly scoped because now you're just making memes to get those emojis, you know? So, and maybe that doesn't actually forward the project. But I don't think you can really get out of manipulating people when you design an incentive system. It's just it's just what you're doing. I'll throw it to Zach.
Yeah, that's really well said. It's funny. It reminded me of when I was a kid. Like, there's the board game called Life, and you play the game of life, but how you win is you make the most money. And like, this is a message that we get so much, so often, that it's kind of like a default, even programmed into the subconscious. And so we use this phrase a lot, like there's many forms of currency, and try to, you know, reinforce this idea that people's actual lived experience, you know, which is that like there are many ways to keep track of what's valuable. And that was a really important way we tried to frame Coordinape. It's like, no, this is all about thanking your peers. It's not about judging how much money they should receive. There's nowhere in the platform that says like one give is worth this much or you got this much. It doesn't show or talk about money anywhere. And you know, I guess the other thing is like, of course, you know, even subtly, anytime you introduce incentives and mechanics, people are going to drift toward gaming them. That just happens. But I also feel like we can, you know, my experience in Coordinape so far is that actually people, and especially people that are collaborating in DAOs, obviously generalizing hugely here, but it attracts the kind of people who are like, oh, what is this game? How are we trying to figure this out? There's a very like, a very communal spirit in a lot of these DAOs. And, you know, in crypto, it's like the base layer is so about being trustless and about like guarding against exploitations. And like, this is, you know, it has to be ready for anyone to exploit it. But inside DAOs, we see it's like actually a really trustful system. And that you know, people always ask right away the first thing, it's like, well, how do you keep people from colluding, you know, and how they're going to give to each other? And it's like, well, you know, we have a message for that, but people don't really try to collude because like they're focused on what the project is. So I guess the point is like, be aware that people will drift toward gaming anything, but also that our experience is that people working on a project together aren't immediately looking to like, how can I get the most give? That's not what their concern is. Their concern is like, great, how do I reward and thank the people I'm with? So don't over-engineer like trying to worry about gaming manipulation. Like, trust people and they can be trusted.
I want to jump in, and I think that it's easy to, the way that you did that is perfect because it's super subjective. There isn't really games. It's a lot easier to game source cred than it is Coordinape, because Coordinape is just, hey, do your friends want to give you, do the people who are around want to give for your value, you know? So like, the value you created. And that is a tough game to like, you know, game. So I'll throw it to MetaDreamer.
Yeah, so I think in terms of manipulation, it's kind of like, you know, I think it all comes down to like dopamine hits at the end of the day, right? That's kind of how nature operates. It's by, you know, manipulating us with like reward signals and, you know, for different things. And, you know, it can get unhealthy, right? Like, according to our brain, you know, it's really good to eat pizza and candy and sugar, but it's not really good for you in the long term. So it has to be balanced as well. But I think in general, the manipulation of our reward systems that we're creating here have like a much better like net positive for humanity than, you know, the current meta, which is like, you know, especially younger generation, like spending, you know, 8 hours a day on Instagram, and, you know, that's their reward system. And, you know, it's kind of like optimized towards like generating ad revenue. And even if you were to like shift 5% of that like human attention away from Instagram into like, you know, solving world issues, then that's like a huge win overall. So I think, you know, there'll be a little bit of like, we have to like play the same game because you have to compete with Instagram for attention of, you know, the younger generation. And so a lot of that, I think it'll it's fine to have these reward systems that manipulate people if people are, actually feeling rewarded and want to be a part of it. And, I think it's like Griff was saying, it's like easy for people to like make those decisions for themselves. Like if they feel manipulated, if they feel like someone's not acting, in good faith and all this stuff, they can, we should design these systems where people have an easy way to like opt out or, transfer their reputation elsewhere and go work on something else, or, move between groups. And, because like in a traditional corporation, you have like much more, you're holding a lot more over people's heads, versus in DAOs, you really want a system where people are there because they want to be there, not because they're manipulated to be there. And if they feel like they're manipulated, it's pretty easy for them to get out and go do something else. But yeah, I think like it's different in like bull market versus bear market. But I also think like different people have different needs in different stages. So there's some people where like money is actually the most important thing because they need to like cover their bases, and they can't really do their best work if they're having to worry about, putting food on the table next month. So, for those people, money is actually like a really key thing that, for them, it is important for it to be focused around money being the reward system. And then other people, they have like enough money that they don't have to worry about that. And for them, the reward they need is more so like a feeling of like higher purpose, or, that they're having an impact, or, seeing other people happy, or, giving their money away. I like to say money can buy happiness if you give it away, right? It makes you much happier to do things for other people with your money than to do it for yourself. When you do it for yourself, it's kind of just like temporary happiness, but doing it for other people has like a more permanent effect on your happiness. So I think, at different stages, we should design these systems to accommodate for what different people's needs are. And, in some of the DAOs we're working in, that we've set up systems where like there's like a UBI like baseline for everyone, and then we use that as like the social like floor, so everyone has like firm footing to stand on. And then on top of that, we have all these like more experimental reward systems, that it's okay if things go wrong once in a while, or we don't figure it out right, because we have that like baseline for everyone to like feel comfortable. And then on top of that, we can experiment.
Thank you.
Really
the chat is
MetaDreamer. What is this UBI? What community uses that?
So it's something we're piloting in MetaFactory. So basically, anyone who's committed to working at least part-time on MetaFactory will get like a base amount of salary. So usually we use a combination of like Coordinape and SourceCred. And the MetaCred prototype I have internally that we're using, but those are all like uncertain, and it does a lot for people's like sort of mental comfort to say that like you're guaranteed to get at least this much every month, and there isn't that anxiety of like, oh, like what if I don't get rated well on Coordinape, or and it starts becoming a distraction rather than the focus. So having that baseline really lets us de-risk doing these experiments on these alternative reward systems.
Yeah, there's a few protocols definitely that are also doing that same thing essentially with Coordinape, is like giving everyone gets a baseline amount of give, so that you have a floor. It's not just like total high wire. I hope I get as much as I need to make my bills. So it becomes more like a bonus structure, a big bonus pool.
For that reason, I don't give Fs in calculus, because it has the ability to affect a student's financial aid. It's like, it's not right.
That's great. There's so much activity in the chat. I want to pick some questions from there. First, I just wanted to share what Nicolene wrote that I think is also opens to another point that we're also starting to talk about of alternative reward systems. So she says, Andrew inspired me to remind me what I did with my kids. Never reward them, but search for what motivated them to achieve something and what success looks like for them, to make them recognize that they achieved what they wanted to reach. So they set the framework. As here you choose the framework and play your own game. That is what Andrew was talking about too, of when the people have choices about the rules of this game, maybe becomes less manipulative as the engines are transparent for everyone. And I wanted to open, Natalia, do you want to share some of the things you're raising around the cultural frameworks?
Sure. Yeah, I just mentioned that many times we talk about, like building the system based on first the community talking about their values and what they want, but also many times they actually don't know what they want. So they say that they want something, then they get it and they're not happy with it because that was actually not what they wanted from the beginning. So yeah, I just wanted to raise the importance of culture within the systems, and culture being supportive of humans actually discovering what they want as we build the systems, and having that space. Like, we don't need to figure it out immediately, right? Like, I think it's really important to bring a component of slowing down and not having to figure it all out immediately. And the culture of feedback and dialogue. So that idea of, we're figuring it out as we build. And also everything that's happening outside of the systems we're building. So the atmosphere that people are living in, and a lot of what MetaDreamer was talking about, the contexts are going to be different. And it's really important to take that into consideration and have that, that flexibility and spaciousness to hear that, even notice that.
Thanks. Does anyone want to respond to that?
Yeah, I have a quick thought. Someone posted this in the chat earlier too, but it got me thinking about, this concept of, self-regulation, or kind of stating what you want to accomplish yourself and then getting rewarded if you meet your own goals that you set. I think that can be really effective, because, DAOs have this general issue of, people like come in and be like, oh, what should I do? And it's like, oh, well, no one's going to really tell you what to do. You have to like figure that out. So there's already this need for people to like be self-starters and to like, create their own like things they want to work on, and, figure out how they can provide value. But, tying that into the reward system as well, it's like, it's also a way to help people be more, take more responsibility for their work, because that's another issue with DAOs is like, you don't have like, the threat of getting fired over your head. So you're not as like motivated to like, make sure things get done on time, like regularly and consistently. And, we need more mechanisms to ensure that happens. So, even like staking on yourself would be a pretty cool thing. Be like, I'm putting this much down on my own, I'm going to do this work and I'm staking this much on it. And if I get it done, then, I'll get a reward. If I don't get it done, then I burn my stake and it goes to other people who did get their stuff done. I feel like there's some cool design space there to explore in terms of nominating work to be done, and, using that as a motivation for people to like meet their own goals. And, that's sort of like the most atomic unit of the DAO is the self. And, there's a lot of work we can do to like better govern and reward ourselves first, before we figure out how to do it to each other as well.
And I was just gonna respond that to Griff's point earlier, framing is everything. It's so critical, because it's sort of it tells people who they are and what's happening in the system. And I think culture is like the ultimate framing device for people that working together. It's like, how are we around here? And I just really appreciated a lot of things that you were bringing up around how do we, how do we slow down? Like, how do we create a culture where listening and being curious is more valued than like having the right answer and jumping in with a solution. Um, and and to me, I guess like that zooms out to like really what is the whole point of DAOs. It's like we're shifting this whole paradigm of like a scarcity and winner takes all sort of economic systems and social systems in some way, to saying like, no, we can actually have many forms of currency and many forms of value, and there's lots of ways to contribute and lots of ways to win. So that's, I think I wanted to put in a plug somewhere for like DAOs are a social movement as much as they are a new technology and a new way to organize. And I think it's important we start telling ourselves and others that story too, about like, what are we really doing here with DAOs? It's a culture shift.
If I could say one thing about that, it's also true that there have been DAOs before there was cryptocurrency. Like Alcoholics Anonymous is a very effective DAO. And looking at some of those organizations that have really long histories, I think could be very informative to us in this space as well.
Yeah, for sure. I never thought about that of AA as a DAO. Good point. And I think tying to what you were saying too, Zach, of how we can slow down and find things that are valuable that are happening in other dimensions of the DAO. It ties to Jess' question of how to capture longer, slower cycle work that doesn't immediately deliver outputs, for example, research and care work, invisible work that builds the space between a community. Does anyone wants to take that question?
I mean, I can say that we are, we're already kind of messing with a version 2 of Coordinape that tries to take on some of that, but instead of giving kind of one-time disbursements or what, like fast money, like grants, ways that you can actually give people streams of income so that they, it's more consistent, more reliable, because a lot of projects obviously don't happen in this same sort of epic cycle. You're working on them for a long time. And I'll also say I've been surprised the way that Coordinape really does capture that hidden work. People will give, usually the dispersions are really quite spread out, with people giving a little bit to a lot of different folks. And I think that's the recognition of, thanks for helping me on that call, or thanks for, this comment you made. Like we really are seeing, if you look at the data that Coordinape comes out, is that people remember all these little things. So when people get like props in the chat and stuff like that, they notice it, and they appreciate it when they have the chance to say thanks to other folks who are doing that kind of weaving work. They will.
Yeah, and I think it's like just like polycentric governance, we need polycentric reward systems. One reward system is probably not going to reward all types of labor very well, probably at all. That each one is going to have its little niche. Sometimes you just got to pay people a salary. I mean, come on, that's what most people do in this world, right? Or hourly, a salary or hourly. These aren't horrible concepts. It works for most people. We don't have to recreate the wheel on everything, And I really liked just like what MetaDreamer said. It's like, okay, we have basic UBI, which is effectively a salary. It's not really a UBI. It's not UBI for the world. It's just like, oh, hey, you're a part-time contributor. Let me just pay everyone the same. It's a nice, simple solution. We do it at Giveth and the Common Stack. And then you have a reward system on top as well. And I think it's the best way to reward slow, steady work is probably slow, steady payments, and just give them a salary. Sorry to be boring. I'll pass it. I'll pass the octopus for fun.
Yeah. I think what makes people feel valued is difficult to algorithmize and quantify. And attaching a salary gives them a number, right? but there's a lot more to feeling valued than that. And it's difficult, like, one thing that's difficult about reward systems is psychologically, our perceptions aren't based on what we're actually receiving, they're based on relative what we're receiving. So if everybody got in this room got $100, we'd be really happy. But if everybody got $100 and Griff got 1,000, we'd suddenly be less happy. Even though we were all better off than we were, it would feel less fair and we wouldn't be happy. And that's like, I don't know how to get at that with anything that's quantifiable or algorithmic, but it's going to be something that keeps popping up in these kinds of discussions. And I think the ideal would be if we can develop a toolkit so that as new DAOs are created and as new problems arise, we're not continually reinventing the wheel, that people have like a baseline of, oh, you could use this approach to this type of problem, potentially. And I will pass to, I don't think Hamad has spoken on this topic yet, if I'm correct. So if you have not yet spoken, I pass to you.
I don't have any immediate thoughts. I'll consider myself spoken.
Cool. Yeah, I see, Eli, you have a lot of thoughts in the chat, and I know that you're also building your own reward system. So do you want to share a little bit about what you're thinking?
Hey everyone. Yeah, I don't have too many thoughts to share, but I guess two sort of points of order I've been focused on a lot now are streaming and modularity, and I think both these terms have been touched on a bit. So I guess to save you all rant, I'll just throw those terms out there and hop off for now, because I will just go and not stop. Cheers.
Thank you. And please share here the link you sent me of your reward system and the things you're exploring. I think people will be glad to take a look too. So we can move away for another question that I think involves a lot of what has been spoken of how to capture value and how to bring it into the systems, how to quantify in the right way. So what are good metrics for evaluating the data collected so value flows become visible and amplified? Because I think a big
Morning,
part
Sean.
of reward systems is also
Hey, good morning, Johan.
making value emerge that wasn't visible before, or bringing value to the
So
attention
what we're
of
doing in the
people
labs
and,
today is we're
having this
starting
value,
on this rewards research.
yeah,
So I'm
brought
actually
to
just
the
going to
awareness.
redirect people
So
back
what are
into
good
the Zoom
metrics
call.
for
It goes for another
evaluating
30
the
minutes.
data?
So
And I'll pass to Andrew first.
we'll just stick around in there for 30 minutes and then we can hop
What
in
I
here.
learned in working on this
Okay,
for
yeah, I
several
was
weeks
there,
this
but
summer
then I
was
got
that
called to the
I
morning
think the best
stand-up.
metrics are still being
Oh, yeah,
developed,
good
and
stuff,
I don't
man.
think any small set of metrics
Yep,
will really
I'll just
capture
head right
what
back
people
there.
are looking
Cool,
for.
cool.
So when we were looking at analysis, I initially just jumped on Gini coefficient because that's like the number one number you use when you're analyzing if a system is fair. But someone correctly pointed out to me that it's not fair to compare like large scale economies to developing small projects. And so even if you use something like Gini coefficient, you need to be very aware of the context. I like Nakamoto coefficient, which is really easy to calculate. It's how many people would have to conspire to hold the majority of the resources. So it's like based in a 51% attack. But I think just like we are continually developing more advanced metrics in every area. And I think there's so much room to develop good metrics here. We use what we have. I think we'll have something much better. I pass to Zach.
Yeah, I think, you know, what metrics to use. I mean, ultimately, it's going to be this basket. It's one of the reasons I'm super excited about the Metacred project that MetaDream is working on, is that, you know, it's a place to collect all of these sort of different data points, different kinds of rewards, and sort of have a fuller picture. It's funny, like the question of like what metrics are helpful. I think having some sort of being able to process and have like a conversation. My old company, no one was ever on salary. We only just after we would invoice a client and put the invoice in the middle of the table, and whoever worked on the project, we would sort of decide how it should be divided up. It was kind of like an analog coordinate. But the real value in it was the conversations, that we would have. It was like you had to actually have a conversation when someone said, well, I spent like 20 hours on XYZ. It was like, yeah, but like we didn't even use it. The hours aren't the thing. And then we have to have a conversation about like, well, are hours the thing? How much does time factor into how much you should be rewarded for something? So, how we build that into Coordinape is something that's on our mind a lot. Like, you get this data of what the community is currently valuing, and then what is the reflexive mechanism to like, okay, do we actually care about this? What do we care about? What is this showing us? And so I guess this maybe is just like a huge dodge of that question, but like, as we think about metrics, also think about like this qualitative piece where there's a vibe, right? And there just isn't a metric for a vibe, and there isn't a metric for people like feel things are good. What gets measured gets managed. And the second half of that quote is, and the most important things are the hardest to measure. So yeah, a plug for things beyond metrics too, even though they're really important. And that's mostly a dodge because I don't know what good metrics are.
Yeah, I mean,
hey there, can you hear me?
Human discernment is a powerful thing. It's a nice metric. It's really nice to give people the authority to within their whatever latitude or reputation they have, or however you want to.
Hey Nuggin, hey, like, yep, I can hear you. So I just posted really in the labs channel. So for the first 30 minutes, we're gonna jump into a Zoom call. There's actually a panel discussion on reward systems. Source credit is super metrics, and we're going to be opening up this topic in the lab, so it's kind of a perfect overlap.
A mix of the like hardcore metrics, because in the
end, great. Where is it?
Are you building the rewards?
Yeah, so I'll see you back here in about 25 minutes.
To, like, keep a village going or something, maybe that's a very different scope than actually we have this very specific product that we're trying to launch, and the reward system is funding the people who are launching that product. It's not trying to be the UBI for the community, and so it's hard to really even discuss metrics without scope. And I think it's a lot easier if in a narrow scope to make very specific metrics than it is in a broader scope where maybe the product is more emergent. You don't actually know maybe it's several products, or it's just a mission in general, and there's a lot of open space to play. Then subjective human discernment is going to be a way better solution than over metricizing, if that's a word, I don't know, but like doing too much with the metrics.
Yeah, I think like Griff said, it's very like situational, but I think if you are gonna have like some sort of global metric, it's almost the meta metrics of like, what, like how can we more effectively like collect data. And so like the one that interests me, like the few that interest me, is like the time to compensation, or like the time to fund like metric, which is like, as if I like come into a DAO and start contributing, how long before I get some sort of reward for it. If we can like reduce that time to like as small as possible, I think that's really effective. And it starts to like, we can learn a lot from game design where, as soon as you open a game, you're usually like doing the tutorial and like, it'll be like, oh, chop down this tree, and you chop it down and you get a level, and like, it's like almost immediate feedback. And that is like a really powerful mechanism. And I think the faster we can like close these loops between like doing work and getting compensated, the more like rich data and like better contributions and more accurate signal we'll have, because a lot of the time the issue is the time from like the work being done and the reward being received is like long enough that a lot of context is lost. and a lot of information is lost from that time. And then another metric I'd say is like what percentage of the work being done in this organization is being like covered by the reward mechanisms or the metrics we're measuring. So it's almost like when you're writing software, you have like test coverage, like what percent of this code base is tested. In that same way, you have like coverage on what, like your reward system, what percent of the contributions or valuable work being done does this reward system cover? You know, like Griff said, SourceCred covers like a very specific niche of metrics that, you know, it's good at what it does, but it's not everything. And, you know, you want to combine like SourceCred metrics with like Coordinape, subjective data, and all these other things. And, you know, in some DAOs, we're doing things where we use like the SourceCred score to decide how much give someone gets in Coordinape, but the actual allocation is done based on give, you know, so it's like it's like a feedback loop. They feed into each other. And I think it's better for us to collect as much metrics as possible and then curate them afterwards, or like create markets to curate those metrics, because different situations, different metrics will matter in different situations and in different times. But the key important thing is to have as much data there so that in the future we can have like different views or different perspectives on that same underlying data. And you know, in terms of subjective opinions, I think with cryptography we have a really powerful paradigm in which we can quantify subjective opinion by signing messages, right? If I just make a statement and sign it with my public key, and my public key is, you know, is attached to like all my on-chain actions and like what DAOs I'm part of, like there's so much like rich reputation data attached to that public key that then that statement and signing the message with it, that allows you to quantify a subjective opinion, which I think is really powerful. And you know, that's when we'll be able to marry and merge like the subjective parts and the objective parts and have them like operating within the same system, and for us to be able to like compose and run algorithms on both of them, where it's not necessarily we lose all subjectivity when as soon as we start to like measure and, you know, do tokens and, you know, try to quantify.
One question from Eli. How do you avoid self-fulfilling prophecies, positive feedback loops, and intersubjective truth about what's valuable?
I would say defining it early and making sure it's real, right? Like, is it like in some ways you want a self-fulfilling prophecy? If you're really scoped well and you're like, hey, we want to build a successful product lots of people use, let's build metrics that bring us towards those self-fulfilling let's build a reward system that makes this you know, actually work. That's the point, right? So I think the challenge is what happens if you're not well scoped, and that's when it's a lot harder, and then you end up into these feedback loops that are maybe not good, and you might get more mob mentality than like, you know, individual truth and discernment and these things. But in some ways I'm not really answering the question, because I actually am like, well, that's kind of the point. If you can do a good reward system, it will fulfill the prophecy that you're trying to achieve.
I guess one related thing to this is that I see in DAOs is I see a lot of people kind of just replicating decisions or like doing things a certain way just because that's how they were done before. And, you know, a lot of the time, especially in DAOs, because things are so chaotic, those decisions were made just as like, you know, off the cuff, like this is what worked at the time, you know, just like just to get the shit done and move forward. But, you know, a lot of those decisions end up like becoming embedded in the culture and, you know, staying around a lot longer just because, you know, someone decided to do that one time in that one way. So having, I think, regular or like creating a culture of people to, you know, self-reflect, and even within an organization to like question the way that we have been doing things, and introspect in that way, I think can be really valuable, because it lets you sort of criticize and like not sort of assume that things are done a certain way because that's the best way, but figure out how to iterate and do them better, not just kind of repeat the past because it's whatever the status quo was, even within a DAO. And I know DAOs are like, where we're all about like defying the status quo of like legacy, but we still get stuck in those habits, and it's in human nature, if it's not really effective if everyone's just questioning everything all the time. So it's a balance, but I think you do need both. And maybe in SourceCred, for example, every like few months or like 6 months, I think we used to have like a retreat where everyone just kind of like has like a full day to like sit and not do work, but kind of just talk about what's happening, like share their feelings, like kind of see how things are going, see what like wavelength everyone's on, if things are still in sync. And so yeah, I think better like human interactions and sort of cultivating like self-care and sort of emotional labor and all that sort of stuff goes a long way.
Yeah, it's very curious how quick traditions are formed with DAOs and these large organizations. And I think this is a challenge of culture that is always trying to balance tradition with innovation, because you want to respect everything that is being built, but you also want to look for ways to improve it. And then this balance is so delicate to reach, like just resonating with what you said. We have one more question to Andrew. From Jess, can you riff on using raw data analysis and about how we pre-process data from different analysis?
On a high level, I think it's really important. Anything you're quantifying and recording, you realize that's data that could be analyzed later, and try to record it in such a way that it's easy to analyze. And I think that's something that we're realizing. There's not just a process of the reward system, there's also a meta process of thinking about the reward system. And you want to think about like, how will we know if this is working or not? What kind of analysis will we do? On a second level, there are these issues of what variables are you measuring? For instance, is gender an issue in how the rewards are being distributed? Is introversion versus extroversion an issue in how the rewards are being distributed? It's a really difficult thing to measure because of the nature of crypto space, but I think it's an important question to ask, and you can even look like coding versus memes, etc. What you want to analyze, you need to be sure is clean coming out. It makes it a lot easier. And the third thing, and I want to give this as a like if future analysts only hear one thing I say, it has to do with a technical thing about when you have lots of categories, try to break them up into subcategories. So we learned this lesson through analyzing impact hours, that if you have a bunch of different buckets, it's really tough to assign the buckets. So maybe if we could do like, if you're going to have 16 buckets, it's better to break it up into like 4 descriptors and 4 descriptors rather than 16 different descriptors. Does that make sense? That's a really, I mean, I had no clue that was an issue until we tried to do it. But in the spirit of reflection, if anyone ever does this again, when you categorize things, try to make it be like 5 yes/no questions that give you 32 options instead of 32 different menu items. I hope that answers your question, Jess. I hope that's helpful.
So we are approaching the end of our panel, and I wanted to see if anyone from the audience wants to share any thoughts or ask any questions. Everybody enjoying the silence.
So yeah, I would have a question. So I've been now toying around with this tool Token Spice on Ocean Protocol, and it promises you that you can simulate a lot of things. And I was wondering of simulating reward systems in a data union that I'm building. So like simulating how much the people should get, and then maybe let the people also vote on how much the other people should get. I mean, if I listen to you guys talking today, I think that this is really ambitious and that this might very, very much backfire. I was just wondering to get some feedback. What do you think about simulating all of these reward systems?
I think it's important. I mean, it depends on how well scoped it is, but you can't, it's hard to simulate a lot of human discernment stuff. But I think if you can, it's a heavily metricized one, I still don't know if that's a word, but if it is one of those, then I think it would be very valuable, especially if you have it as part of a token economy and it's being generated in a certain way. I think it's valuable.
I would say also, I think there's a lot of stuff out there that we could look at applying to reward systems, like iterated prisoner's dilemma is something that's really well understood academically. It seems to me like there's a way you could translate that to, like, I'm pro simulation, but a lot of times we also simulate things, and if we had more background, it would be helpful. So I guess I'm trying really hard not to volunteer myself right now to do a background literature search on how to get started with this. But just like, I think simulation with some acknowledgement of other things that might connect to that are already well known would be really awesome.
I think the most effective way it can be done is if there's like a strong feedback loop between the simulation and like the real world application and experiment, and having one inform each other. Like I think, creating models and simulating them in a vacuum from like things that people are actually doing, like you can learn a lot of stuff that way, but it's not as useful as like it's not that practical in terms of the real world impact it has and to like people actually making better decisions, because people who are busy doing stuff usually don't have the time to like simulate, and they're more so learning by experimentation. So I think having a way for the people on the ground to experiment and share what they're doing to the simulators, who can then generalize and find patterns, and computers are better at like seeing things from the big picture and from like an objective standpoint than humans are, because humans, we're always only seeing things from a specific perspective and lens, and we don't have the global viewpoint. So I think this comes back to like collecting really good metrics and data from what's happening in the real world, and then we can use that to inform our simulations and design better simulations, and then take the learnings from the simulations and apply them in real life, and just iterate that way, almost like a AI training.
Don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, we are going to distribute this to people who are actually collecting data to train AI. I mean, there's like also some connection in this regard, and basically we can do then change of these rewards continuously and see what impact does it have. There's different categories like uploading, annotating, and verifying stuff. So we have different categories, and people would then be rewarded differently. And then we can see after some time, okay, we collect more data, we do the simulation again, we can see how it changes. So it could be an iterating system. So yeah, let's see. But I think, yeah, it will be a challenge, but we will try it for sure.
Thank you, Robin, for jumping in. And thank you so much, Griff, Zach, Andrew, Hamad. It was really great to hear from you today. And I'll pass to Angela to give some final announcements and what is coming next.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation. I also enjoyed all the chat messages, I must say. I think we should make them available for everyone, because we had links, we had awesome ideas, we had great proposals there, and I can't wait to dig deeper. So we'll share the materials, the recording, as well as the chat. Stay tuned, follow us on Twitter, governance_DAO, or at the Telegram group. And of course, the discussion on reward systems is not finished. We just started it, and it will be a big topics for the governors over the next month. First, I'd like to highlight again that we'll kick off a research program where you all are invited. If you want to take part, please pre-register. James shared the link already a couple of times at tokenengineering.org. And this will be around the question, and I think MetaDreamer, you summarized it so nicely. Of course, we have such a lot of data available now in these systems, but we have to make use of them in an intelligent way. And it's not only about metrics, it's also about looking at the real world and try to not only think in quantification, but also in these new qualities of these new communities. And I think this is really a big, ambitious mission. We want to make first steps here. And yeah, this is a call to everyone. Take part in this co-research. Let's collaborate here. And I already can see there's such a lot to explore and so many voices and great thoughts here, only in this call. Before we close, I'd like to thank you to Ground Control. This is the team of the governors. It's Renzo, Jess, Livy, James, Eugene, and Jeff. So these people are working in the background to organize these events, to organize research around this. And big thank you to you all for investing your time and your energy and passion here to this topic. Thank you so much. And Jess, I think you want to add some more words about the next event coming up, Jessica Sattler.
So yeah, just quickly, so we can maybe even let everybody go a few minutes early. So with this discussion, UBI, which I recently heard from Julio with Circles UBI, also means unconditional basic income, which I thought was a really beautiful way to describe it. So I'm chatting with Julio. There's a Basic Income Earth network, which is a huge network of UBI projects around the world. So I am recruiting some panelists to discuss this topic and go deeper. So Proof of Humanity, Circles UBI, Good Dollar, and a few others will be joining, as well as Bia, hopefully, from Dada Art, who very much strongly feels that every incentive is coercive. So that should be a pretty fascinating panel to hear just some different perspectives. Of course, this is obviously a complicated topic, so super appreciate hearing all of the various reflections and facets of the diamond around this conversation. But yeah, we'll be announcing. So if you want to click follow on Governance Twitter so you can stay up to date, that should be a really fascinating discussion to add and kind of round out a little different look inside of that part, as Griff mentioned, of kind of like combining these systems. So we'll go a little deeper into the learnings from some of these groups who have been deep in the UBI wormhole, if you will. Thanks, Ange.
Okay, yeah.
And YGG wants to make an announcement quick.
Thanks, everyone. Awesome. Thank you so much to the panelists and everyone here. Really enjoyed this presentation. And this is being picked up by the TEC Labs. We're looking at quantitative rewards models. So we're going to be taking a look at a lot of the systems brought up today. And we're doing about a 6-week series on that in the lab. So that's every Friday for an hour, 9 a.m. PST, 6 p.m. CEST. So it's actually right now. So everyone from the labs was redirected into this call. And we're going to hop back over to Discord to have the first open discussion on how to approach quantitative modeling of these systems. And I posted the link in the chat there. And thanks, everyone. And back to you, Libby.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Perfect. So there you go. Comments. Just people mentioning something and the labs get kicked off in a minute. Okay. Thanks for sharing, Sean. Thanks everyone for joining. Hope to see you again in our next event and talk soon. Take care.
Thank you. This was excellent.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Recording stopped.
Awesome. Hey, guys.
Hello.
So I would suspect we would have a few more. There's Nate. Okay, good. Here we go. Hi, XM3 Van.
Hi, everyone.
Nice to have you here.
Hey there.
Hey, Nogan. Cool. So, did everyone get to see the panel?
Yes. I joined from the beginning.
Awesome. I think this is the most exciting topic. Like, this is the closest route way to approach basically incentive engineering, token engineering. It's how do we reward people? And there were so many good discussions brought up. I mean, just to name a couple, I really liked Dr. Penland's discussion on values, right? And actually Griff talked about this a lot as well with the self-fulfilling prophecies of like, well, that's actually exactly what we want if we get the scope right from the beginning. And we have an accurate depiction of what we're trying to create together. And I think Natalia touched on that as well with sort of like culture and purpose, bringing people together, and that kind of bleeds into a whole topic that was discussed of this sort of intrinsic motivations versus extrinsic motivations. There were some discussions on sort of UBI models, which Griff said, well, it's not UBI, it's just salary. That's just what that is, so let's call it that. And then there was Jessica said UBI should actually stand for unconditional basic income, which is kind of interesting. And I posted some of my opinions on the chat. In the chat, I do believe that UBI is sort of the most basic, essential model that enables people to join a network, start contributing, and not have a sort of stress of like, are they doing enough, or are they getting only rewarded per, you know, successful project. It enables people to sort of follow their passion and have their security and safety met so that they can, you know, pay their rent and live life, but also be able to participate and contribute into the networks that they're very passionate about. So incredible panel discussion. It's really good that it was recorded. Oh, I did want to actually copy and paste the whole chat log, but I forgot to do that, because I feel like there's so many topics in there that could be mined from a very technical perspective, a sort of data science perspective, and modeling. One topic I was going to bring up at the end, there was some discussion of simulations, and I think it's really important to differentiate models from simulations. Often we talk about them as if they're the same thing, but they're very different. So everything, all these systems that are in place so far, and all the conceptual ideas, UBI, or the Give token that Coordinape is implementing, these are all models. A model is just a way of constructing something. It's a construction. So any Excel spreadsheet is a model, any Python, you know, software function, or, you know, just composing variables in scope in Python and doing data science, all that stuff is modeling. So modeling is essential. Simulations are much more sophisticated and advanced. So simulations are where you actually put all your models together and define the interactions between them, and then you usually give like a time step or time axis where you can simulate how these models actually play out in their interactions. And then you can not just model your system, but you can also model the agents and how the agents are going to interact with the models of the system. And then when you run that through time, that's the simulation. So I did want to bring that point up. I didn't quite get a chance. Modeling is essential. Simulations are very advanced and enable us to see how systems can converge into different states over time, given the initial conditions. So nice. I hope everyone else is as passionate about this topic as I am, and I think we'll kind of jump into it. I'm going to start this lab the same way I start every lab. I'm just going to open up the lab agenda, and everyone can hop in there, and from there we'll just get started on this sort of kickoff of researching quantitative reward systems. There's been no work done so far sort of in this series. There was, I'm sure a lot of you heard on the panel or maybe know about this, but there was a pretty deep research initiative led on the PRAISE dataset and the whole PRAISE system prior to the Hatch. Quite a few people, I know Nuggin was involved with that. I think BK and Johan were sort of involved in that. A lot of it was led by Dr. Penland and Mohammed, also a great data scientist with Longtail Financial. He was making a lot of contributions to that. So this will be a sort of continuation of that PRAISE analysis that was done, but it's also going to be way more generalized. So we're going to be looking at not just PRAISE systems, but really doing a survey of all of the systems, at least that were discussed in that panel discussion, and then as many as we can get our hands on. So we're going to open up this lab series with kind of a survey, which is sort of a traditional academic literature concept where you just do a broad general scan of everything that's out there and available in the world, and you synthesize as much information as you can about those systems. And that very broad discovery process enables you to find what points are particularly interesting, or maybe it's the general patterns that are repeating, and then we can start to apply frameworks to this. So we can even start to develop some of our own literature on reward systems in DAOs, but most importantly, we can survey all the literature that exists. And there is so many worlds of literature on this. There is a lot of research being done already in the DAO space. If you look at Block Science and Prime DAO and Yearn and even the TEC, there's been a lot of writings between blog posts and forum posts on these reward systems. But also there's an opportunity to step outside of the DAO space and borrow from this sort of interdisciplinary nature of token engineering. So for example, Dr. Penland mentioned that Alcoholics Anonymous is a DAO, and he's totally right. It's really interesting to think of it that way. It's been around way before crypto, but it's a DAO. So maybe that's a great case study that we could look at and say, okay, what is their reward system? Well, I don't think anyone gets paid to run Alcoholics Anonymous or to attend. It's a completely intrinsically motivated DAO, which is a very interesting case study because this was a topic that came up as well, sort of subjective rewards, or maybe it's more closer to intrinsic versus extrinsic, or quantified versus qualitative. Yeah, maybe that's what we're looking at here. Alcoholics Anonymous is operating on qualitative rewards. It's people trying to improve their lives and coming together. There's no quantified reward process to it. Although there must be some sort of quantified reward process. There must be a flow of value or of funds in that network, because I imagine it would cost resources to facilitate, to rent spaces, but maybe not. Maybe it's often done in churches and things like that. So really interesting case study there. Hi, Dr. Penland.
Hello.
Nice to have you here.
Nice to be here.
So I was just kind of giving a few of my, what I saw from the panel discussion, just a few topics of the many. I was saying that what a great data source to mine. It's really great that that discussion was recorded. And I really hope the comments were recorded. I was meaning to like copy and paste all them, but I actually forgot to. So I hope
yeah, they were.
Excellent, excellent. So right there from that panel discussion, I'd say we have enough data to sort of seed like research topics. There's a lot of research topics that could be pulled out of that. And what we're doing here is about a 6-week series on quantitative rewards research. In fact, maybe that's not even accurate. Maybe it doesn't have to be quantitative systems. I'm coming from a data science lens, but perhaps some people will actually be interested in researching qualitative reward systems. And so that was a bit of a preamble, and I'm just going to now open up actually, I'll pause here and see if anyone has comments, and then we'll go into opening up the labs agenda, and we'll just get a doc started on initializing this rewards research series. So I'll take a moment here, and anyone just feel free to ask any sorts of questions or any comments that you might have. And that's fine if not. Meanwhile, I'll go ahead and I like to do this on camera so everyone gets reminded of how you can access it. There is the labs channel in the TEC here, and you'll find pinned messages, and then the labs agenda is the second link there. So we have today, and anyone can open this up. I think it's completely open for editing, so feel free to maybe we'll add everyone's name in here, which is actually a good practice that looks like we forgot about for a couple weeks. So September, I'm having a little bit of lag on my computer. September 10th. So initializing the rewards research series. And why don't we go ahead and have everyone write your name in here, which is a good practice. A big topic in token technologies in crypto is the ability to do retroactive actions. Actually, I think MetaDreamer brought this up. The on-chain data is such a rich source of mining contribution data, and it's a concept that exists in blockchain, and people will become more and more aware of it into the future. It'll become more valuable into the future. But the idea is that everything that ever happens on chain will be forever accessible as a data point. So a lot of work that may go unseen or uncontributed at first because the systems are so new and evolving, that work might actually be rewarded in the future. There is an example of this. I think the founder of the Matic Polygon protocol created a sort of charity DAO for COVID relief in India, and people were able to send funds just sort of through Ethereum, and it raised a few $1 million for COVID relief. And he didn't tell anyone this beforehand, but after all the funds had been donated as essentially charity, he then went ahead and initialized a DAO and gave people governance rights according to the contributions that they had made. So then they then had influence over how those funds could get spent. So the idea of retroactive reward systems is very much a concept when we're talking about token technology. And then all these data points that we leave, all of these artifacts, I like to call them, are very important as we go about. For example, this document could be scraped sometime in the future, and there could be rewards to everyone who has... Oh, my dog just spilled my coffee. Okay. Cool. Thanks everyone for joining the doc there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually spin up a new doc, and we'll call that our sort of rewards research manifesto.
Sean, I'm sorry. How do we get into the doc to type that we were here?
It's in the labs channel and pinned messages, and you'll see the agenda.
Oh.
There. Good question.
Thank you.
Tech labs, rewards, oops. Tech labs, rewards, research, manifesto. Cool. And let me share. Okay, so this is going to be open for editing, so we can all contribute on this. And I'll post it in the labs channel. And I'll go ahead and also link that in the agenda for today. Okay, awesome. See people coming in here. Oh, this is great. This is great. So I think what would be a really good use of our time, we have just over 15 minutes. So hopefully we can squeeze in a full round robin. We can go through everyone and put in some notes on maybe ideas we have, maybe something we came away from the panel discussion, or something we would love to see researched in this research series. I think we have about 6 weeks scheduled through the labs, so that's about 6 hours of collaborative online time of all of us being together, including today, so 5 more hours coming up in the future. So that's not that much time, so it's important to make the labs time very effective and very potent, and we can all sort of synchronize. And then it's key to have a little bit of asynchronous momentum throughout the weeks. And so what that usually looks like, because everybody has a different time and energy available in their life, usually a few people get really engaged and really interested and pick up pick up some research, or pick up some modeling, or pick up some documentation, and really keep it going throughout the week. And then we all come together in the labs, and a few people have something to share, and then I'll usually bring some direction on how we can put it together and move forward for the next week. So we'll do a round robin here, so I'll just give this a title here. And I'll go ahead and start. So I am extremely passionate about rewards. In fact, I think if I open up a new browser, if you can see my my home page, let's see if I can go to my home page here. This is actually just my home page. This is my favorite book. It's called Reinforcement Learning: An Introduction by Dr. Richard Sutton and Andrew Barto. This is a textbook on reinforcement learning. It's kind of like the foundational textbook. And reinforcement learning is a field of artificial intelligence where agents learn from feedback from their environment. And it's all built on reward systems. The foundational setup, the mathematical setup, is called the multi-armed bandit. And it's this idea, it's kind of a misleading name, it's not really a bandit, it's about slot machines. So if you have a slot machine with, say, 10 arms that you can pull, and every arm has a different rewards distribution, one arm you pull and you just lose your money every time, then you pull that arm a few times, you probably won't want to pull it anymore. But there might also be an arm that gives you $2 every time you pull it, and you might want to just keep pulling that arm. But there might be another arm that, 4 out of 5 times it takes your money, and 1 out of 5 times it gives you $1 million. And so that brings up this idea of exploration and exploitation. You need to explore your environment and able to exploit it. Anyway, so rewards are sort of the fundamental unit of quantitative, it's rewards are quantitatively measured and utilized in these systems to actually train agents to achieve certain objectives in their environment. I'll go ahead and link that here. So nice. So let me just go YGG, and a few of my points are learning, thank you whoever was typing that, learning from AI research, reinforcement learning, and utilizing well-defined objective, what we might call objective functions, or really just quantitative formulations of reward. So that's really interesting to me. There's another topic, and I think I could go on for the whole, I don't want to take up too much time. I really do want to do a round robin. I'll just put one more point here. I have recently been fortunate to be working with a coach, a sort of relationships and community building coach, and we've been learning and studying about this model called NVC, or nonviolent communication. It's really a very comprehensive framework for communication. And in that, something came up, and it's this idea of the 6 fundamental human needs. Fundamental human needs. So I'm really interested in these sort of like more qualitative frameworks that we could actually map to data sets. So I'm just going to list those out. Those are certainty, significance, contribution, and just in the sake of time, just in case I can't remember all these off the fly, I'll type these out as they come to my memory, and in the meantime, I'll go ahead and pass it off. And whoever's in this doc, feel free to just say a few things and put in a few notes. Or if you're not in the doc, I can type for you as well. But I'll go ahead and pass it off to BK.
Yeah. So I joined the call pretty late, and I don't have right now anything to say. I need some time to think, so I'll pass it to the next person, Jean.
Sorry, can I say just very quick, because I have to leave early today and I'm on the road. Yeah, I also joined a bit late the call, sadly, but well, I would like to research a bit what has been what is being used right now. Like, I'm very interested in Coordinape and all that stuff, so I could take a bit of that this week and kind of look into it and write up some stuff, so some summaries for the rest, if that's okay.
That is awesome, Nugget, and that would be a huge contribution.
Okay, nice, great. Then I'm leaving now. Sorry. See you guys.
Thank you, Nugget. I'll see you later. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Jean.
Cool. Yeah. Dr. Penland brought up an excellent point in the chat during the rewards video earlier about how improvements in GPA can have obvious implications for the educator in terms of like rewarding themselves. So I would be interested to also see some like indirect implications of reward systems and how advocates for certain reward systems could potentially derive benefits for themselves by distributing rewards of various sorts. I think that would just be an interesting something to look at.
Awesome, thank you, Jean. Go ahead and pass it over to someone.
Pass it to Johan, please.
Thanks, Jean. Quite new to this idea of rewards, although I've been in the space for a while now. I'm more interested in the programming aspect of everything. So I want to know if we're building something. Is there, what projects are currently on right now? Also, is there an aggregate reading list that we're supposed to go through when it comes to this thing?
Livy, do you know if there would be a reading list?
We don't have one yet, but it's probably a good thing to have. There was a lot of resources shared in the chat today that we can start organizing one from there.
Awesome. Yeah, I just want to have a solid ground to stand on before I do anything here. Okay, I'll pass it on. Who's next? That would be Livy, I guess.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll have to leave on the top of the hour, but it's great to have this document being started. And I think for me, something I'm really curious is how to have the interoperability of all of these tools working well in a way that we don't drop value in the cracks, but that we actually have like a view of everything being mapped. and also ways to like evaluate the health of the systems of the organization as a whole through this data being collected. So yeah, having analysis that are maybe advancing the analysis and testing multiple metrics and like creating this feedback loops for the tech, the culture. And I'll pass to Octopus.
Can y'all hear me?
Yep.
Yep. Loud and clear.
Yep.
Great. So I was hoping, like, when we did praise analysis, I learned how to do some things like look at Etherscan and try to look at what the distribution of a token actually is. And I also saw some metrics that different people have proposed, and Vitalik proposed some metrics at the end of July in a blog post. And I think it'd be really cool just to develop. This is not like a high level research topic, but just to get some people some experience, including myself, more experience about just using these skills and, like, you know, computing what is the Nakamoto coefficient of this token, and comparing different tokens and seeing if that correlates to their survival, or I think there is a lot of hard quantitative work we could do. And my second objective, which is kind of higher level, would be to kind of work to produce some cogent educational materials for people who are getting started, so that if we do another 6-week round of this, we will have, you know, 20 to 40 pages of notes of something people could read, so they don't have to pay the same startup cost. So those would be 2 objectives I would be interested in doing. And I will pass to, I think it says XM Van 3. I don't think you have gone yet.
No, I'm here. Hi. So you can call me Thomas, by the way. So in either case, so I quite like the topics that have been already mentioned. So one thing is what you said, Sean, right? YGG.
Yep.
Is the 6 fundamental human needs. I think that sounds really interesting. There's right now so much going on in my brain, so I'm kind of struggling to focus my thoughts. Also, given that the talk was before, but topics that I found interesting, but I have to be honest, I don't know how to put them into a data science context just yet. So that would be something I would have to think about, was the manipulation and coercive point, I think, that was made, and also the individual setting individual goals and being rewarded for them. So that's I think it's a point that was raised in the chat by I think Nicoline, and MetaDreamer picked up on this issue later on, saying something about staking on a goal. Like, you propose a goal, you stake on it, and if you get it done, you get rewarded, otherwise you get slashed, and all the rewards are distributed to other people. So I don't know if this was of any help, but this is kind of my everything that falls out of my brain right now.
Awesome, thank you, Thomas. I think Austin, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I wrote down the short-term versus long-term reward systems, and that was related to, I think, what MetaDreamer and Dr. Penland was saying about how game loops are very short-term reward systems, and how that might help or incentivize or decentivize certain human interactions with the different systems. And that's also somewhat related to the reinforcement learning, since usually the AI agents are a lot better at looking long-term than we are. So that, that's something that I found kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's super interesting, and you're right. The time aspect is a key component of reinforcement learning. There's essentially 3 pillars of machine learning. There's supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning. And reinforcement learning is the only one that has this sort of time domain, and it's so fascinating because that's what we experience as humans, is like always that trade-off between short-term and long-term goals. And it's the concept of investing, right? Investing time, investing energy, investing money. Fascinating stuff, and there's a lot of directions that can go. So that's a great one, Austin. Thanks for that. And I think Nate is still up. Are you there, Nate?
Yeah. Hey. I think keep mine short. The thing that really interests me about modeling these reward systems is the actual social. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep. Yeah, we could hear you, Nate. I think I'm lagging a bit on my end just because I got so much going, recording and everything. The impact of reward systems on social and organizational structure. Awesome. It's great to see people building out this doc in parallel. That's what I like to see. Many hands make light work. We are at the top of the hour. I want to really thank everyone for being here. Again, thanks to Dr. Octopus and the other panelists that we got to see on the panel earlier, and looking forward to a great series. It's awesome to have you all here in the kickoff, so lots of good things ahead. I'll see you back next week, and feel free to reach out to myself or anyone else in this group if you have interests or want to do some async work together. And otherwise, have an awesome day and a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. See you.
See you, Sean.